Brittany here. I hope everyone is having a great time learning about nature. This week we are going up and sideways and backwards and wait, that's too many directions. That's because this week we are going to explore a natural resource that is all around us, the air. In your activities this week, you will learn how plants make more of themselves with help from insects that use the wind to get around. You will also get to craft a pinwheel, make some really cool seed bombs, and show off your creative side by assembling some wind chimes. Then we'll all get to cool off with some homemade popsicles. You know the drill by now. It's time to make some conservation connections. Remember, conservation is the protection of things found in nature, and everything in nature relies on clean air. So what is air? Why do we need it? And what does it do? I'm very glad you asked. Those are some good questions. Air is a mixture of gases that, when combined, make up what we call the Earth's atmosphere. You may have heard of some of these before: nitrogen, oxygen, water vapor, argon, and a tiny amount of carbon dioxide. The combination of these gases helps make it possible for us to breathe. When air is in its purest state, we can't see it or smell it. But there is one way we know it's there. When air moves, we can feel it as wind. Humans have learned to use the wind for things like cooling down on a hot day, sailing across the oceans, and even for making electricity. This week, you will test the power of the wind when you make your very own pinwheel. A much larger version of a pinwheel, called a wind turbine, can create electricity when the wind blows. You will be able to listen to the wind when it blows really hard with the wind chimes you will be creating. Before you get started, let's talk about some of the ways that plants and animals use wind too. In your kit, you will find an activity where you get to act like a pollinator using cheese puffs. In order to understand what a pollinator is and why it's important, first we have to talk about something every plant wants: babies. That's right. Every plant wants to create more of itself. One way it can do that is by creating seeds. In week 1 of camp, you planted a seed. And that seed, and many others like it, started as a flower. And before it could become a seed that would become a plant, it had to be pollinated. Pollination is when pollen, that yellow stuff that makes you sneeze, is moved from one part of a flower, called the anther, to another part of the flower, called a stigma. But plants can't move very far on their own. So, how do they get pollen where it needs to go? Certain flying insects, bees, birds, and bats, use the wind to travel from flower to flower. We call these helpers pollinators. They don't necessarily know that they are helping to make seeds. Most pollinators are after the nectar in flowers. Nectar is a sugary liquid that sits at the bottom of most flowers. And as pollinators dive into the flowers to slurp up that sugary nectar, pollen sticks on them and falls off when they land on another flower. Many edible plants that grow right here in North Carolina rely on pollinators to make food, like apples, blackberries, and chestnuts. Another plant that many farmers grow in our state for a different purpose also requires pollination. Take a second to check the tags on the clothing you are wearing right now. I'll give you a second to do this. Do your clothes have cotton in them? If so, you wouldn't be wearing them if it weren't for bees, birds, bats, butterflies, and moths. All these reasons and more is why it's important to conserve all the places where these animals and insects live. By preserving large areas of forest and meadows, Foothills Conservancy of North Carolina and other land trusts like us help protect these important pollinators by allowing lots of native flowering plants to grow. At the same time, preserving land helps keep the air we breathe clean. As I mentioned earlier, when air is in its purest state, it doesn't smell or have any color to it. But sometimes the things humans put into the air, like carbon dioxide from building things in factories, riding in cars, or flying in planes, makes the air smell weird and look gray or orange. Trees and grasses that grow in the places we protect, act as natural filters for gases like carbon dioxide by grabbing onto them and turning them into oxygen, which you and I need to breathe. So the more trees and grasses there are around you, the cleaner the air will be. Now that you've made some important conservation connections, let's look in our kits together. Each of you did so great with last week's activities that we gave you another prize. In your kit, you will find some binoculars. These make it easier for you to see things that are really small or really far away. Test yours out this week and see if you can spot some of the pollinators we mentioned earlier. And now, campers, it's time to explore. Have fun this week and be sure to share what you do through pictures, videos, and comments on Moodle. See you next week.